Okay, what did Mendel discover? So, what was the big deal? So, the first big deal was the distinction between traits and alleles. Now, again, these terms came along later, but what Gregor Mendel figured out by looking at all of these pea plants that he had grown over the years is that there were 7 distinct characteristics. Today we call those traits, and we know that the information for creating those traits in a pea plant is located on the genes of the chromosomes in the nucleus of every cell in that pea plant. So, for every trait, he found that there were 2 alternate versions. So, there are 2 versions of each trait, and you could see what he discovered here on this little illustration. Today, we call those 2 versions of a trait alleles. So, something else that he discovered, and this goes into the probabilities and the predictability that came along with his crosses, is that one of these traits is more likely to be seen than the other. And in fact, that one trait is likely to be seen 75% of the time, and the other trait 25% of the time. So we see these traits here, and there's a couple of them that we're going to practice with today and maybe later on. But we see that pea plants have a characteristic called the first one, let's see, we're going to deal with plant height. So we have an understanding of height. And plant height comes in 2 versions, or there are 2 different forms of plant height. Plants can be tall, that's a gene. Plants can be short, that's a gene. So there's a tall and a short version of height. Pod shape. So pea plants, they have peas come in a pod, and that shape is either inflated, or you could call it smooth, or pinched, or you can call that constricted, and that's where you can see the bumps of each of the peas inside of it. So that inflated is going to be seen 75% of the time in a big crop of peas, and the pinched or constricted only 25%. Same thing with the flower color. So violet, red, I just call it purple, will be seen 75% of the time, and the white 25% of the time. And you probably already know what these are called. The one that is seen in a crop of pea plants 75% of the time is referred to as dominant, and the one that's only seen 25% of the time is referred to as recessive. Now, this complete dominance, again, this is what it's called when you have a dominant and recessive, a purple or a white, a tall or a short, a inflated or a pinched pod. That is the first, and probably I would say the simplest of all of the ways that traits are inherited is through complete dominance. But it's not just in pea plants. So we'll do a little activity with this later on, dealing with humans. So you can see here, and again, you're going to have some time to play around with this later, that there are some human traits, some human characteristics that are inherited with this complete dominance. So there's a dominant and recessive. That's it. The way that your thumb can bend. So your thumb can either bend backwards at a 45-degree angle, or it can't. It's hitchhiker's thumb. Looking at Leo DiCaprio there, he has a very pronounced widow's peak. If you don't have a widow's peak, then you have a straight hairline. Some people can roll their tongue. Some people can't. Some people have earlobes that are directly attached to their face. Some of them have ones that have a little bit of space. It's called a detached earlobe. So we'll take a little time to play around with those later. Now, this particular set of notes, I've added something that I like to refer to as word art. So in the space provided to you, here's just a visual way to hopefully help you remember traits versus alleles. So for every trait that you have, every characteristic, every gene, type of gene, there are at least two alternate versions, and they're called alleles. Now, if you notice the one on the left, all caps, that's for the dominant. The one on the right, all lowercase, that represents the recessive. So in complete dominance, for every trait that an organism has, like the ones I mentioned in the pea plants and the humans, there are two versions. One dominates and the other one recedes.